I never noticed her before, not really. She was always there, in the background, moving quietly through the private dining hall of my Manhattan hotel. Her name tag said Danielle, but I had never asked her name myself. I was too busy. Too distracted. Too wrapped up in board meetings, investors, quarterly losses, and my son, Liam. Liam had been diagnosed with autism 3 years ago. He didn't speak often. He didn't like to be touched. He wouldn't look you in the eye. And music was just noise to him. Or so we thought. It started with a sound. I had stepped out of a meeting early and was walking past the restaurant on the ground floor when I heard something unexpected. A single note, slightly out of tune, hesitant, but clear. Then another. And another. I stopped in my tracks. It was a violin. I peeked in through the half-open service door. There she was, Danielle, kneeling beside Liam, who held a child-sized violin in his small hands. He wasn't flinching. He wasn't panicking. He was focused. His brows furrowed in quiet concentration as he dragged the bow across the strings, guided gently by her hand. I hadn't seen him this calm in months. My first reaction? Shock. Then confusion. Then suspicion. Why was she with my son? How did she even know he liked music? I stepped inside. "Excuse me," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "What's going on here?" Danielle froze. She stood up slowly and turned to me, her hands still held protectively behind Liam's shoulders. "I'm sorry, sir," she said carefully. "I didn't mean to cross any lines. He was watching me play during my break a few days ago. I asked if he wanted to try." He nodded. My eyes shifted to Liam. He looked up. Right at me. And smiled. Something he hadn't done in weeks. I didn't know what to say. That smile, it stunned me more than the violin. Liam's smiles were rare. Fleeting. Like solar eclipses. And yet here he was, standing calmly with a violin under his chin, grinning up at me like the world wasn't a daily storm inside his mind. Danielle moved to take the violin from him, but Liam gently pulled back. He wasn't done. She looked at me. "He's learning fast. I used to teach music before I started working here. I keep an old student violin in the staff room. It's just something I couldn't give up." I crossed my arms, watching her. A hotel server teaching my son the violin. It felt surreal. Like walking into a dream I didn't mean to enter. "You taught music?" I asked, more curious than accusatory now. "Yes, sir. For 7 years. Then my school lost funding. I took this job to help my grandmother pay for her care. I still practice when I can." Her words were calm. Honest. No hint of complaint, no bitterness, just facts. Liam plucked a string softly, listening to the vibration. Then he tried again with the bow. The note wobbled, but it was deliberate. Intentional. "Can he keep doing this?" I asked quietly. "With you?" Danielle blinked, surprised. "Of course. If you're comfortable with it." Comfortable? That wasn't the word. I was something else entirely. Humbled, maybe. Intrigued. And, for the first time in a long time, hopeful. "I'll pay you," I added quickly, almost ashamed. "Whatever your rate is. I can talk to the manager, get your schedule adjusted." Danielle raised a hand gently. "I'm not doing it for the money, sir. I'm doing it because he's special. And, because he listens." I glanced down at Liam again. His eyes were on Danielle now, waiting. Open. I nodded, my throat tightening. "Then let's see where this goes." The next day, I cleared my morning schedule for the first time in months. At exactly 9 a.m., Danielle met us in the hotel's quiet lounge, an elegant room normally reserved for high-end guests. But today, it became something entirely different. A classroom. A sanctuary. Liam sat on the plush carpet, violin resting across his lap like something sacred. Danielle knelt beside him, speaking in a soft, rhythmic tone I hadn't heard her use before. Each instruction was gentle. Each correction came with patience. No rush. No pressure. He followed her every word. Over the next week, something began to shift. Liam started humming softly while walking down the hallway. He began making eye contact, if only for a few seconds. When I asked him if he wanted eggs or cereal for breakfast, he pointed and said, "Eggs." Clear as day. That single word nearly brought me to tears. Danielle noticed too. She said music wasn't just about learning notes, it was about unlocking connection. The vibrations, the patterns, the sense of control it gave him, it grounded him. Gave his world shape. One afternoon, I found them in the lounge again. Liam was learning to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It wasn't perfect, but it was recognizable. And Danielle's face lit up like he was performing at Carnegie Hall. I stood back in silence, watching. And for the first time, I noticed something else, something I'd been blind to before. Danielle didn't just help Liam. She saw him. She didn't flinch at his silence. She didn't pity him. She never tried to force him into anything. She waited. She listened. She let him set the tempo. That's when I realized, all the specialists, tutors, and therapists I'd hired before, none of them had made him smile like this. None of them had ever let him be. Word of Liam's progress spread quickly, at least among the staff. The hotel manager approached me one evening with raised eyebrows, whispering that a server had been using the guest lounge for music sessions. I simply nodded and said, "Good. Make sure no one disturbs them." He didn't ask twice. A week later, Liam performed a full melody without stopping. Danielle clapped softly beside him, beaming. I had recorded the moment on my phone, my hand barely steady, knowing I'd watch it 1,000 times. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in my penthouse suite, watching the video again. Liam's concentration. His slight, proud grin at the end. Danielle's gentle nod of encouragement. Why had I never thought of this? All the specialists, the behavior charts, the meetings with top neurologists. None of it touched what she had done with a $60 violin and 30 minutes a day. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Maybe all this time, I'd been treating Liam like a problem to be solved, instead of a person to be understood. The next morning, I called Danielle to the lounge before their session. She looked nervous, maybe thinking she'd crossed some invisible line. "I just wanted to thank you," I said, standing. "You've done something no one else has. Not me. Not the doctors. Not even his teachers." She gave a soft smile. "I didn't do anything. He's the one playing." "That's not true," I said. "You reached him. You unlocked something. I don't know how, but I want to help you continue. Not just with Liam." Danielle tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "I want to fund a program. Music. For kids like Liam. Autistic, quiet, overlooked. I'll cover everything, space, instruments, teachers. But only if you lead it." Her eyes widened. "Sir, Danielle, I interrupted, "my name is Charles. And I'm not asking this as a billionaire. I'm asking this as a father." She blinked back sudden emotion. "You really think I could do that?" "I think," I said carefully, "you already have." Danielle sat in stunned silence for a moment, her fingers resting lightly on the violin case beside her. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, not doubt in her own ability, but the weight of possibility. Of change. She finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. If I do this, it can't just be in a fancy lounge. It has to be in neighborhoods where no one thinks music matters. Where kids get ignored like they don't exist. I nodded. Then that's exactly where we'll start. Within a month, we had a pilot program in motion. I funded it anonymously, at her request. She wanted no headlines, no praise. Just children, instruments, and a room that felt safe. She called it the Quiet Strings Project. Liam was the first enrolled student. But he wasn't the last. Word spread, quietly at first, through schools and support groups. Dozens of children signed up, many nonverbal, many like Liam, caught between labels and low expectations. Danielle met them all with the same calm, steady grace. She didn't just teach them music. She taught them how to listen to themselves. One afternoon, a journalist caught wind of the program after a school counselor shared a video of her student playing his first full song. The video had gone semi-viral in a few advocacy circles. They traced the funding back to me. When the reporter asked why a billionaire had quietly backed a grassroots violin initiative, I said, I watched a woman unlock my son's world with patience, not credentials. With kindness, not titles. That's the kind of education we need more of. She wrote the article under the headline, Black Server Helps Autistic Boy Find His Voice, Now She's Leading a Movement. I sent Danielle the link. She only replied, Tell Liam we have rehearsal tomorrow. No excuses. He wouldn't miss it for the world. 3 years later, I sat in the audience of a packed auditorium, my palms sweating against my tuxedo slacks. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. And then, the first note rang out. It was Liam. Now 15, taller than me, and no longer the shy, silent boy who avoided eye contact. He stood center stage, a full-sized violin tucked beneath his chin, bow poised with quiet confidence. He wasn't just playing anymore. He was performing. Danielle stood just off stage, her hands clasped, watching him the same way she always had, like he was the only person in the world who mattered in that moment. The song he played wasn't anything flashy. It wasn't meant to impress critics or fill arenas. It was the same lullaby she first taught him all those years ago, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But this time, the notes were clear, sure, even defiant. He played for himself. He played for her. He played for every kid who had been dismissed as unreachable, unteachable, unremarkable. And the moment he finished, the room erupted. I stood and clapped, but I wasn't the only one crying. Around me, other parents, teachers, and strangers wiped their eyes, because they hadn't just witnessed talent. They had witnessed proof. Proof that one quiet act of belief can echo louder than any applause. Danielle walked out to join him. She didn't speak. She just put a hand on his shoulder, and he smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not one seeking approval. Just a boy, seen, heard, and understood. That night, as we walked to the car, Liam turned to me and said, Dad, I want to teach one day. Like Danielle. My voice caught. You will, I said. You absolutely will. The next morning, I found myself staring out my office window, thinking about Liam's words. I want to teach like Danielle. That sentence didn't just make me proud, it made me realize something deeper. This wasn't just Liam's journey. Or Danielle's. It was mine, too. For so long, I had lived in a world where everything was measured by outcomes, profits, performance, prestige. But what Danielle gave us couldn't be measured. It wasn't on a spreadsheet. It couldn't be bought. It was presence. Compassion. Purpose. And it changed everything. I made a few calls that afternoon. By the end of the week, the Quiet Strings Project had a new headquarters, an old community center I purchased and renovated in the heart of a neglected neighborhood Danielle had mentioned years before. She didn't want luxury, just space. So we gave her space. And time. And full control. Liam volunteered there every weekend, helping younger kids hold their instruments correctly, showing them how to care for their bows, their strings, their patience. He wasn't the quiet boy in the background anymore. He was leading. And Danielle? She refused to take credit. I didn't teach him that, she'd say every time someone praised her. He just needed someone to open the door. But we all knew better. Without her, there was no door. And now, because of her, there were dozens. Hundreds. Each one opened by a child who'd been told they wouldn't understand music, only to prove they could create it. Danielle didn't just unlock Liam's voice. She gave him a future. And through him, she gave it to others. The day Danielle received her official City Recognition Award, she almost didn't show up. The mayor had organized a formal ceremony downtown, media coverage, council members, even a televised broadcast. But when I called her that morning, she said, "Charles, I have a class. I can't leave my students for a stage." I laughed, knowing she meant it. So we moved the ceremony to her. The mayor, the cameras, the entire delegation, everyone showed up at the community center that afternoon. The paint still smelled fresh on the walls, and second-hand violins hung proudly on repurposed bookshelves. It was loud, imperfect, full of life. Just the way Danielle liked it. She stood at the front of the room in her usual sweater and jeans, surrounded by 20 kids tuning their instruments. She looked completely unfazed when the mayor approached with the plaque. "Danielle Green," he began, "your work has not only changed lives, it's transformed the way this city sees children who were once overlooked. On behalf of the community, we thank you." She didn't give a long speech. She just smiled and said, they were never the problem. They just needed a chance. The room erupted into applause. I looked over at Liam, standing near the back, arms crossed, watching her with quiet admiration. I saw it clearly then, he wasn't just inspired by her. He wanted to become her. That night, he wrote in his journal, something he'd only started doing recently. He left the page open on my desk by accident. It read, "Ms. Danielle didn't teach me how to play. She taught me how to hear. I want to do that for others." I closed the journal gently and turned off the light. Danielle had given him a gift I never could. And now, he was ready to pass it on. 2 years later, I stood in the very same community center, only now, it had doubled in size. New wings had been added. A recording room. A practice hall. Even a scholarship fund, Liam's idea, named after Danielle. It was the grand opening of the Green School of Music and Expression. And Liam, now 17, was its youngest certified instructor. He stood at the podium in a well-fitted suit, nervous but composed. His hands, once shy and uncertain, rested confidently on the edge of the microphone. Danielle sat in the front row, just off-center, surrounded by her students, past and present. Some were now in college. One had been accepted into a youth orchestra in Chicago. Several had returned just to be part of this moment. Liam took a breath and began. I spent a long time not speaking. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't know how to say it. I thought that made me broken. But Ms. Danielle showed me that music speaks in ways words can't. She didn't fix me, because I was never broken. She just showed me where the volume knob was. The room was still. Not a cough. Not a whisper. He looked directly at her. So today, we open these doors to kids like me. Kids who feel invisible. Kids who get left behind. And we tell them, you matter. You belong. You're not alone. Danielle wiped her eyes. It was one of the only times I ever saw her cry. After the applause died down, Liam picked up his violin and began to play, not for an audience, not for praise. But for her. The same melody as the first time. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. But now, it sounded like a symphony. After the performance, the crowd rose to their feet. The applause went on for nearly a minute, longer than any ovation I'd ever heard in a boardroom or business gala. But none of it was for me. It was for Liam. For Danielle. For every child who had once been told they'd never fit in. Danielle stepped onto the stage as Liam lowered his violin. She didn't take the mic. She didn't make a speech. She simply walked over and hugged him. It was the kind of hug that says, "I see you. I'm proud of you. And you're ready now." Later that evening, I found her in the hallway alone, leaning against the wall, her eyes closed. "You created something extraordinary," I said. She opened her eyes and shook her head gently. "I just showed up. He did the rest." I paused, then smiled. "You know, when I met you, I thought you were just a hotel server." She chuckled. "I was a hotel server." "Not to Liam," I said. "To him, you were the first person who listened." She looked away for a second, then whispered, "That's all most kids need." And with that, she walked back toward the music room, where a new group of children waited, violins in their laps, their eyes full of curiosity and nerves. Liam stood at the front now, his posture firm, his voice steady as he welcomed them. I stayed in the hallway, watching through the glass. Smiling. Grateful. Because long ago, in the corner of a hotel restaurant, one quiet act of kindness didn't just change a boy's life. It built a legacy.